What is going on, YouTube? It's Andrea here at VW Family Farm, and today it's a rainy day in August, which is kind of nice every once in a while. Actually, it was getting pretty dry here. We could use the rain, and it gives me a chance to do some things inside. And one of the things I want to talk to y'all about, I thought about putting this off for a little while because it's not cold and flu season here yet, is elderberries. I don't usually make elderberry syrup until closer to fall because we don't take it year round. We usually take it like fall through early spring, and then when the flu tapers off, we stop taking it for a while. Kids get out of school, which my kids are not in school, but when school is out, sickness around us seems to die down some because kids are not together every day spreading germs that then spread it to their parents, that then bring it to church, and on and on and on. So when school is in session, it does affect us too. Although we try to do things to boost our immunity, drinking teas, taking elderberry syrup, taking our vitamins, eating healthy, things like that, to keep ourselves as healthy as possible to fight things off, or if we do get something, to get rid of it quickly. But I decided not to put this off until I actually was ready to make it, because a lot of you may be harvesting elderberries, or you may be about to harvest elderberries. So I wanted to talk with you quickly, and then I'm going to show you how I make my syrup. I've done a video on this before, but it's quite old. It's one of our first videos, and so I'm going to show it to you again because you might want to make it right now, and this will have all the info in one place. I will have Lane put the recipe down in the description box. It's pretty simple and basic, but let's get started. So let's talk harvesting elderberries. A few videos ago, I showed you, I think it was on the video that Ben and the kids were harvesting or looking for tomato hornworms with the black light, and I was carrying around a trash bag in the background. Well, that was full of elderberries. I have 2 bushes in my yard. So elderberries are ready right now. So you may be thinking, what do I do now? I've picked them. First off, do you even know how to pick them? You don't want to stand out there and pick them off individually. You can just cut the entire clusters off. You're not going to harm your elderberry bush doing that. So you can just cut off the huge clumps of them. I put them in a trash bag. Now, in the past, I have harvested elderberries for 3 years now, and I've done it 3 different ways. The first year, I knew nothing about it. So I did know to cut off the clumps. I had read that. And then I just brought them in, sat in front of the TV, and picked off elderberries forever. And if you're picking off fresh elderberries, you're gonna have juice everywhere because they're still really ripe and juicy when you're picking them off, and so it gets messy. You can do it that way, nothing wrong with it. It's just gonna get a little messy. It's not the easier way to do it, but that's how I did it the first year. But I do remember thinking, oh man, because I don't like meticulous little jobs that take forever. Like some people love to sit for hours and shell peas. I don't. That's just not my personality. I'm ready to move on to something else. So I remember thinking, man, I'm going to dread this from year to year because I got through it, but that was awful. That took forever. So the next year I started researching and thought there's got to be a better way. So the second year, last year, I wound up freezing them, and then I took them out after a couple days. I just spread them out on cookie sheets, the big clusters, and froze them. Now the drawback to this is you have to have a chest top freezer because they're going to take up a bit of room to get the cookie sheets in the freezer. But once they froze, a couple days later, I got them out, put them in my big dish pans, and just went to picking them off. No more mess like the year before, and it was a lot quicker because they kind of just wanted to fall off in my hand. Still wound up with some of the little stems on them. And then this year I did more research because I'll be honest, last year when I went to boil those, and the year before, because I've always bought dried elderberries and they would make this rich, deep purple syrup. But last year when I boiled mine that I grew on my own, the berries wound up turning like green once I boiled them, and the juice was only light purple. It was still sort of even see-through, but it was purple. It just didn't have this strong elderberry flavor. Now, that could be from 2 things. I had not dried them, and what I was buying was dehydrated, or maybe they weren't completely ripe. So this year, I took a different approach. I did more research, and I let them get fully ripe, like bursting almost with deep purple goodness. At the point that even the birds were starting to take some. Okay, and then I got to reading and I read, you don't need to freeze or dehydrate elderberries. You may be thinking, why? And for one, let me put in a little disclaimer at this point. Don't eat elderberries straight off the vine. They will make you sick. I'm not gonna say they're gonna permanently harm you or anything like that, but they will make your belly hurt because elderberries need to be heated to 145 degrees to make them safe for you to eat. So that can either be through dehydrating, or once you make them into the syrup, they're fine, but don't eat them fresh straight off the vine. So the reason that I got to reading that said don't freeze or dehydrate them is because a lot of people's theory is make them whatever you're gonna make them into right then and store that instead of storing elderberries. You're handling them twice, you're doing more work. But here's my thought process on it. I wanted to know how to dehydrate them. I'd already froze them the past 2 years because I wanted to see if that made a difference on making the syrup more rich and dark and purple like I was buying dehydrated elderberries did. Number two, I like making elderberry syrup in small batches in the fall and winter. For one, when you're making it, your house is gonna smell wonderful. For secondly, it's not hard. It's just adding a few ingredients into some water and letting it simmer. As long as you're home and just hanging out at the house, there's nothing to it. You don't have to babysit it or anything. It just needs to simmer and bubble for a while. So I enjoy doing that in small batches. Then I just have fresh elderberry syrup all the time. I'm gonna show you guys how I make it. And I dried my elderberries this year. I don't wanna get ahead of myself. This year, I did 2 different methods, okay? This bag was my first harvest. This was a ton of berries. Be prepared when you dry them, they're gonna shrivel down to like nothing compared to what you harvested. And that's where I think my problem came in with cooking fresh ones that had not been dehydrated. I was cooking way too few because when I was making my recipe in the past, it called for 2 cups of berries. Well, I don't know how many fresh ones it would take to make 2 cups of dried berries because I dehydrated these. These are 1.5 quart jars, and this was a trash bag full of berries, and it wound up being 2.5 quart jars. Okay, I tried 2 different methods. Let me quickly tell you why, and then we're gonna get to syrup making. If you've plucked elderberries off before by any method, I don't care what it is, the very tiny little stem, the last part of the stem before you get to the elderberry wants to stay on it. They're almost like hair-like. They're thin. They're not the branch or the stem or anything like that. It's the last little piece that's attached to the berry. Those are hard to get off, whether you're plucking them off fresh or whether you're getting them off after you've frozen them or whatever. So I was trying to find the best way to get those off. Well, guess what? I haven't found it yet. I've watched people online shake them after they are dried or fresh through a screen big enough for the berries to fall through, and it'll catch a lot of the stems. That will catch the big stems, but I actually tried that. Ben rigged me up a bottom of a bee box. I shook, still got those little stems through. They've not hurt us in the past. Now, if you read officially about elderberries, do your own research. It will say that the stems, leaves, everything is toxic. But those tiny little hair-like things, I've not been able to get all of those out, and it's been fine. So I'm assuming by stems, they're talking about the bigger parts, which I definitely get all those out. Okay, so first method I did, and then we're gonna make syrup. The first one I did was I just took the big clusters of berries, and like there was a stem and then a big cluster of berries. I clipped right down here close to the berries but left stems on them and just spread them on dehydrator trays and dried them at 145 until they were dry. I just did it for several hours, kept checking them, and when most of the stickiness was gone, I turned it off. Method 2, and that worked okay, but then I still had all those stems to try to sift through. That was this bag. That's when I used the bee box method where I shook, and it was okay, but I thought, I got to tweak this. Second time, I took the trash bag that you saw me. I went out there in minutes and just, you need some scissors, cut off the clusters, put in trash bags. It took me minutes. and I had a trash bag full. I have a chest type freezer, and so I just stuck the entire trash bag in the freezer for days and let them freeze solid. When I took those out, those berries almost just shook off of the stems. It was awesome. That is how I will do it from now on, is just pile them in a bag. If you only have a Walmart sack full or whatever, tie that up, stick it in your freezer for a few days. Like I said, it was super easy. They almost just shook off. What didn't just fell off in my hand. And I had minimal stems left to pick through. Then I took those, they're frozen at this point, and spread on dehydrator sheets and dried at 145 until they were dry. Now they took a little bit more time because these had not been frozen. These had. So these had moisture to them that these didn't have. So it took a little bit more time, but they turned out really good. And so I have dried elderberries. This is actually a ton of berries that I've wound up with. This is 2 bushes full. So we, I think, are ready to make syrup. It's easy, it's delicious. Our family takes a tablespoon a day, every day, starting in about October till about probably sometime the 1st of April. It just depends on the season around here. If I start hearing that, because we have some doctor and nurse friends, if they start telling us, you know, we're not seeing the flu anymore, we kind of stop, we taper off and give our bodies a break from it. Not that it's necessary, but that's just how we do it. It's worked beautifully. The years we've slacked off of taking it, we have gotten the flus. And I am by no means a medical expert. I want to say that right now. I'm just looking for ways to care for my family. So you do your own research and let's get busy and make some syrup. Okay, so let's make some elderberry syrup. It's very easy and it makes your house just smell like fall. So the first thing we are gonna put in there is we're gonna put 1/4 of a cup of dried ginger root. Now I have a recipe that makes a small batch, but I go ahead and make a larger batch that winds up making about a gallon by the time it's all said and done, because we're gonna start with a gallon of water, reduce it by half, and then we're gonna add 2 quarts of honey back to it, equal parts syrup, or equal parts juice and honey. So it's gonna wind up being back to about a gallon. So that's 4 quarts. 4 people taking a tablespoon a day doesn't take us that long to go through it. So, but if you want, I'm gonna put my recipe that I do that makes 4 quarts. You could half it or you could cut it down by 1/4 and just make 1 quart at a time. I do not can my elderberry syrup. I just don't. We go through it fast enough. I keep it in the fridge, just in the door of the fridge, and keep it handy for us to take every night. And also, I prefer to make it in small batches. Like I told you, I enjoy it. I enjoy the smell of it making, so it's not something I make in a huge quantity and can. You could can it and hot water bath can it just like you would jelly or something else. But I also want to show you one more thing. These are called recap lids and they fit on mason jars. This is for a wide mouth, this is for a regular mouth. This is what I put on our elderberry syrup and that's what we pour it with. It just makes it easier to pour it. I have some little shot glasses. People laugh when they come to my house about why do I have shot glasses sitting around. It's for elderberry syrup. That's what we use them for. Everybody takes about half of one a night. And we just wash them and reuse them. So I'll link these down below from Amazon if you want some of these. It sure makes less of a mess, especially with kids pouring it, and sometimes moms too. I tend to make a mess too. So, but let's get back to getting started. Okay, 1/4 of a cup of dried ginger root, and I've just got me a fairly large pot here that I can just let simmer without worrying about it boiling over. 24 whole cloves. And I buy these in bulk from Azure Standard. That's always linked below just because I buy so much from them and like to tell y'all about it. But a lot of this stuff, that's where I buy it. You don't have to be super exact with the cloves. And then 4 cinnamon sticks. Again, I get these from Azure Standard in bulk and just keep them in this jar. I prefer their organic spices. That's just what I like to buy. Last thing is 2 cups of dried elderberries. Like I shared with you at the beginning, if you're not using dried elderberries, you're gonna need to look up the ratio of fresh to dried because it's quite a bit of difference. I thought it would be like double or something like that, but I think it's going to wind up being quite a bit more than that, just because my juice wound up, it didn't even look the same as juice I'd made from dried berries. Okay, and then for that amount, I'm going to need to add a gallon of water. So I've got 4 quarts of water here I'm going to pour in. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this on until it comes to a nice bubble, and then I'm going to put it on low where it'll just kind of bubble and simmer for about an hour, and that will reduce the liquid by about half if you let it simmer for about an hour, and then we'll come back and finish this up. Okay, I don't know how well y'all can see down in there, probably not very well, but it cooked down by about half. The next step is just going to be to have another pot with a strainer of some sort and strain all the seeds and little pieces and cinnamon and ginger and all of that out of it, so all that you're left with is juice. So you will just want to let that sit and strain, and kind of as it cools, mash the berries. You might want to take a spoon and mash the berries so all the juice comes out of them. You're just going to let that cool quite a bit, because we're going to mix it with honey on the next step. And the hotter we mix it with the honey, you're killing beneficial properties in the honey. So that's our next step, is just let it cool down. It's still going to have a tad of warmth to it, or the honey's not going to want to mix with it. But let's let it cool for a little while. Okay, so it has cooled but still has some warmth to it. I'm going to go ahead and measure how much I have. It's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio with juice to honey. So I need to know how much juice I have so I know how much honey to add. So I'm just going to measure. I've washed this pot. I'm going to put it back in there. This is a 4-quart measuring cup. So you can see this is pretty deep purple. It's not as dark as I get from like berries that I order online. I was going to say store-bought, which they are, but they're not from a local store or anything. But I've come to the conclusion this is a lot darker than I made last year. I told you my suspicions were that I wasn't using enough berries when I was using fresh berries versus the dried ones I ordered online. But I also wonder if maybe I have a slightly different variety than what I'm buying online. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm going to keep measuring, and then I'll come back and tell you how much I had, and we'll proceed. Okay, so I wound up with right at a half a gallon of juice, which is what I was going for, because I started with a gallon of liquid, reduced it by half. So I'm going to add half a gallon of honey. This is from last year, and it crystallized. So I'm going to put this to good use and mix it in elderberry syrup. I left it slightly warm because it's going to take a little warmth to dissolve this honey because it is crystallized. And then that's it, guys. I'm going to add this in. I'm going to have to rig it up some way for that to drain pretty good because it is crystallized. It's not going to run out as good as regular honey. I may have to put it in some warm water to get it to liquefy enough to pour out. That just may be what I have to do this time. After that, I'm just going to put it in jars and stick it in the fridge. From there, you can can it if you want to. Hot water bath can it. You'll need to look up how long to do that because I've never actually done that. I don't feel confident recommending a time or anything specific. But that's all there is to it. And then you've got a lot of yummy goodness to start taking to fight the flu and colds. You can take it more intensively when you do get something. Some people take this and drizzle it over ice cream. Some people make cobblers and things out of elderberry. My kids will say, oh, like, we don't want to take it. And I've reminded them several times, it's a berry just like any other berry. People pick it and make it into stuff to eat because they like it, not because it's medicinal. It's just one of those foods that is also medicinal, but don't think of it like a medicine. It's just a cinnamony berry flavored syrup and it tastes a lot like honey. So if you don't like the taste of honey, you need to probably sweeten it with something else, or just take a smaller dose as a juice, not as a syrup. So, because it does come out tasting heavily like honey. Thanks for watching. Hope that helps y'all, because I hope you're harvesting elderberries right now to know what to do with them. You can go ahead and do this, make them into syrup. You can freeze them, you can dry them. Just, there's endless possibilities. So just decide what's your goal. Are you want all your syrup made at one time, or like me, do you want to store the berries and then just make a little at a time? So there's lots of different ways to do it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later, and God bless.